Imagine a time when plays weren't just, entertainment, but a vibrant mirror reflecting a nation's soul, its history, its passions, and its deepest questions about life and faith.
Exactly. We're talking about a cultural explosion that gave the world some of its most enduring characters, like, well, Don Juan, and completely reshaped how stories were told on stage.
And today, that's what we're diving into. The Spanish Golden Age drama, known as the Comedia, and the incredibly rich, sometimes pretty turbulent historical backdrop that allowed it to flourish.
Right. We've pulled together some fascinating sources, comprehensive histories of Spanish drama, detailed accounts of Spain's past, even insights into its artistic and political shifts. It's quite a mix.
Our mission here is really to give you a shortcut to being well-informed. We want to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, uncover some surprising facts, and, connect the dots between the plays, the society, and the history.
So you can really appreciate this extraordinary period. Think of it as a personalized journey to understand what makes this era so compelling and actually still relevant today.
Okay, so to really get the Commedia, we need to understand Spain itself first. It's like setting the stage, right? How did centuries of conquest, religious fervor, and cultural fusion forge this unique nation?
It's quite a story, yeah. The Iberian Peninsula, where Spain is, it's been a land of constant movement and cultural blending for millennia. I mean, we're talking ancient cave paintings from maybe 12,000 years ago.
Wow.
And then waves of new arrivals, Iberians from North Africa, Celts from Central Europe.
And they mixed together.
They did. They formed the Celtiberians, who were apparently pretty skilled with ironworking.
Yeah.
And even before them, it was a trading hub.
Right, I read about that. The Phoenicians in Cadiz, way back.
Yeah, 11th century BC, then the Greeks on the eastern coast. So this constant influx, it created this really unique cultural mosaic from the very beginning.
A melting pot from the start. Okay, and then came the Romans. They must have left a huge mark. Language, laws, Christianity.
A massive mark. They really transformed the peninsula. And yes, Christianization by the 4th century AD. Then, as Rome declined, the Visigoths took over for nearly 3 centuries.
Visigoths were Germanic, right?
Yeah.
But Romanized.
Exactly. They embraced Roman culture, codified laws, and really solidified Christianity.
Ah.
What's interesting is they initially tolerated Jewish communities who held some significant positions. But as the Visigoths themselves converted fully to Catholicism, that tolerance started to fade, sort of foreshadowing later complexities.
And those complexities really blew up in 711 AD. The Moorish invasion.
Right. Tariq, his Saracen army, reinforcements, they swept across most of the peninsula in just 7 years. Incredible speed.
Wow.
And that led to centuries of Islamic rule. Saracen culture and power really peaked in the 10th century.
But this era, the Reconquista, the Crusades against the Moors, it wasn't just a simple back and forth, was it?
No, not at all. That's a crucial point. While these centuries-long crusades definitely instilled a deep militancy in Spaniards, gave rise to powerful religious military orders like Santiago and Calatrava, it wasn't always clear-cut. Christian armies sometimes allied with Islamic emirs. And famous figures like El Cid, I mean, he even fought for Arab rulers at times.
That complexity is so important because the idea of the Reconquista, this liberation war, has been used as a powerful rallying cry throughout Spanish history.
Absolutely. Even in the 20th century during the Civil War by anti-Republican forces. And you still hear echoes of it today from some far-right parties in Spain.
So it shows how historical narratives shape identity, politics, and for our purposes, maybe things like honor and duty that became so central in the plays.
Exactly. It forged a particular mindset. Now, out of this complexity, Christian kingdoms began to consolidate power. The 13th century was key.
How so?
Well, Castilian became the official language under Alfonso X. You also had Catalan and Galician developing. Plus, early European universities were founded Salamanca, Palencia, a real intellectual growth spurt.
You also mentioned something, fueros. What were they?
Good question. So starting around the 10th century, these fueros were basically charters. They gave towns special privileges, a way to escape strict feudal control.
How did that work?
It meant town councils were directly dependent on the monarch, not the local feudal lord. They even had their own militia cavalry, the caballeros villanos.
So it built a different kind of loyalty, directly to the crown.
Precisely. And a strong sense of community self-governance. People literally went to war to defend their fueros. You see echoes of this in the plays, actually common people appealing directly to the king for justice against an abusive noble.
Fascinating. A kind of civic identity forming. Okay, then fast forward to the 15th century, Isabella and Ferdinand. Their marriage unified Spain.
Well, it formed a personal union of Castile and Aragon that's widely considered the foundation of a unified Spain, yeah? Huge economic and military power came with that.
Setting the stage for 1492, a massive year.
Absolutely pivotal. You have the conquest of Granada, the last Muslim emirate, earning them the title Catholic monarchs from the Pope. And of course, Columbus's first voyage, the start of a vast Spanish colonial empire. So you've got this newly unified, intensely Catholic Spain suddenly flush with power and wealth, looking outward.
And this leads into the Habsburg rule, Charles I, Philip II, the Siglo de Oro, the Golden Age itself. Empire at its peak, El Escorial. Sounds glorious.
It was on the surface,
Yeah.
but underneath.
Yeah.
A significant strain. Philip II's reign, for all its artistic flourishing, also saw the Spanish Armada destroyed, multiple state bankruptcies, the northern Netherlands breaking away.
So not all smooth sailing.
Far from it. The 17th century brought more decline, devastating plagues, endless wars like the 80 Years' War, the 30 Years' War. This tension, this contrast between imperial grandeur and internal struggles, you see it reflected in the drama.
And the Spanish Inquisition was active during this time too, right? Focusing on Catholic orthodoxy, scrutinizing new Christians.
Yes, it created this atmosphere of intense religious and social pressure. Questioning former Muslims and Jews suspected of secretly practicing their old faiths led to discrimination, exile, even execution.
How did that impact the creative spirit? Did it stifle it or channel it?
Probably both. It certainly meant theological and moral questions were front and center, often explored through allegory and symbolism in art and theater. Adherence to Catholic doctrine was paramount, shaping thought and storytelling.
Okay. Then the Bourbons came in the 18th century, tried to centralize things.
Right, reforms aimed at increasing revenue, consolidating power, culminated in Spain actually backing the Americans in their War of Independence.
Wow, what a whirlwind history. But you can see how all these layers, Roman, Visigothic, Moorish, Catholic, Imperial, created this incredibly complex society.
Exactly. And it's out of that fertile, often contradictory ground that the commedia emerged.
So let's talk about the theater itself. Where
Yeah.
did it start? Church plays.
Yeah, the roots are definitely in liturgical dramas, church performances,
Yeah.
but there was also a lasting influence from classical Roman drama,
Yeah.
and secular stuff persisted even after Christianization.
Like what?
Well, the Roman-educated Visigoths apparently enjoyed performances in amphitheaters, and there were street performers, joculators, jugglers, musicians, dramatists doing farces and mimes.
A lively scene.
Seems like it. By the 14th century, you had plays about Christ's life, but also these elaborate Corpus Christi festivals, especially in Catalonia and Valencia, big street processions with sacred scenes, tableau.
Uh-huh.
Those evolved into miracle plays, which were a bit different from the Castilian autos. Those were more like mystery and morality plays. And it's these autos that eventually led to the famous autos sacramentales.
Before the Golden Age proper, though, there were some key early works, like La Celestina.
Oh, absolutely. La Celestina from 1499. It's this amazing hybrid, part drama, part novel. It really contrasts the sort of idealized world of young lovers with the very gritty, carnal realism of the title character, Celestina herself.
Sounds groundbreaking.
It was hugely influential, mixed medieval morality with Renaissance ideas about love and beauty. Then you had pioneers like Juan del Encina who brought in Italian influences.
Right, you mentioned him. He had Venus bringing someone back to life.
Yeah, in Egloga de Placidadi Vittoriano, kind of exalting pagan love. He also used rustic dialects for comic effect, which became a big thing later.
And Juan de Timoneda, he was more of a publisher.
More a bookseller and promoter, yeah. But crucial because he published some of the first Spanish translations of classical plays, like Plautus, making those texts available.
It's interesting you said Spain held on to medieval influences longer than elsewhere. Nativity plays, Corpus Christi.
Wow.
They kept evolving.
They really did. That religious drama stream continued strongly, developing into the auto sacramental, using allegory to explain the Eucharist. It ran parallel to the more secular forms.
So when did things start shifting towards what we think of as the Golden Age commedia?
Yeah.
Tragedy, national themes.
Yeah, that really picked up steam towards the end of the 16th century. Playwrights started experimenting more with classical tragedy, but adding Spanish elements, honor, legend. Cristobal de Viures was important here.
What did he do?
He fused classical ideas with contemporary Spanish sensibilities, and he was one of the first to use the three-act structure. His plays had shocking scenes, themes of self-determination, rejecting pure classical fate.
And Juan de la Cueva, he brought in national themes.
Yes, hugely important. He'd spent time in Mexico, came back, and started writing tragedies based on Spanish history and legends, gave them real social and political weight. He drew on classical sources but emphasized free will and divine providence over destiny, making Spanish plays feel Spanish.
Okay, and we can't forget Cervantes,
Right.
more famous for Don Quixote, obviously, but he wrote plays too.
He did, and he was a master of the entremet. The short satirical interlude played between acts of a longer play. Plays like El Viejo Chiloso. The jealous old man, they brilliantly capture lower-class life with sharp wit and irony. Great stuff.
So all these threads, the history, the early playwrights, the mix of religious and secular, they all lead to the big one, Lope de Vega, the Fénix de los Ingenios.
The Phoenix of Wits, indeed. He didn't invent the commedia single-handedly, but he absolutely gave it its definitive form. He basically redefined commedia to mean any full-length play, comedy, or tragedy.
And he famously ignored the classical unities, right? Time and place.
Threw them right out. Lope believed drama should reflect the variety and, frankly, the messiness of life. So his plays jump between locations, span years. He also pulled material from everywhere imaginable: mythology, the Bible, history, Italian novels, everyday Spanish life.
He created a whole universe. And his use of language? Poetry.
Masterful. He advocated mixing serious and funny stuff, just like life. And he had specific ideas about which verse forms worked best for different situations. Decimus for complaints, sonnets for monologues, romance or ballad meter for telling stories. He controlled rhythm and sound beautifully.
And his characters, you said they felt real.
Very much so. He gave them language appropriate to their station. You have the noble caballero and dama, but also the witty servant, the gracioso, and the clever maid, the criada. And his female characters are often incredibly strong.
Like Laurencia in Fuenavejuna.
Exactly. She rallies the whole town to defy a tyrannical commander. It's based on a real historical event. When the king investigates who killed the commander, everyone just says, Fuenavejuna did it.
Wow.
And the king pardons them. It's this amazing defense of common people against abuse of power, echoing those fueros we talked about.
And El Mejor Alcalde, El Rey, the best mayor, the king. That shows the king as the ultimate judge.
Right. The king disguises himself to investigate a nobleman who dishonored a peasant bride. He steps in personally to ensure justice. It really emphasizes that justice has to work on all levels, civic and personal.
And honor.
Yeah.
That was a huge theme, wasn't it?
Absolutely central. Deeply ingrained in Spanish society, going back centuries. Family name, reputation paramount. Lope explored its complexities, even its dark side.
Like in El Castigo sin Venganza, punishment without vengeance.
Yes, a later, darker play. A duke takes this brutal Machiavellian action to restore his honor, but it clashes horribly with Christian morality. It also has a metagonist, a character who almost seems aware he's in a play, acting like the playwright. Very innovative.
Lope also wrote historical epics, mythological plays.
Oh, yes.
Mm.
Plays honoring the Habsburgs, dramatizing history, and mythological plays often with elaborate staging and music, especially for court performances. His output was just staggering, a truly prodigious achievement.
He really set the standard.
He created this vigorous, inventive model that hundreds of playwrights followed.
So if Lope created the model, where does Pedro Calderón de la Barca fit in? He took it to its peak.
That's the general view, yes. Calderón, born in 1600, inherited this fully formed dramatic tradition from Lope and his school. But he refined it, stylized it. He also benefited from more advanced stagecraft, better machinery, lighting, music.
So more polished, more sophisticated.
You could say that. His plays often have these majestic stories, very clear concepts, elevated language, and tightly structured plots. Intense conflicts, often shocking outcomes. He was brilliant at contrasting characters to highlight their traits.
And he tackled some really deep philosophical themes, didn't he? La vida es sueño. Life is a dream.
Ah, yes. 1635. Widely seen as the masterpiece of Spanish drama, it dives right into reality versus illusion, free will versus destiny. The story of Prince Segismundo, locked away because of a prophecy, who gets a brief taste of power, messes up badly, then gets a second chance and chooses prudence and forgiveness. It's this profound exploration of what is real and can we overcome our fate? Questions we still ask.
It sounds incredibly modern in some ways.
It really does, and this focus on free will connects to broader theological debates happening at the time, which brings us back to Tirso de Molina, actually.
Calderon's contemporary,
Yeah.
and the creator of Don Juan.
Exactly. Tirso's El Burlador de Sevilla, the trickster of Seville, it introduces Don Juan en Honorio. Not a deep thinker like Segismundo, but this impulsive, defiant seducer.
Famous for saying, que largo me lo fies. Like, God gives me plenty of time to repent later.
Right. That's his catchphrase. And he's ultimately damned, not so much for the seduction, but for his presumption, his arrogant belief that he can sin now and repent whenever he feels like it. It's a fascinating take on free will and divine mercy.
And Tirso tackled these theological debates directly in other plays, too.
He did. El condenado por desconfiado, the man condemned for lack of faith. It directly addressed the whole predestination versus free will argument, suggesting despair or lack of faith is as damning as Don Juan's overconfidence.
So these plays were really engaging with the big religious questions of the day. And Calderon mastered the autos sacramentales, too, those allegorical religious plays.
He was the undisputed master. They became huge public spectacles, especially for the Feast of Corpus Christi during the Counter-Reformation. His El Gran Teatro del Mundo, the great theater of the world.
You mentioned that one, the meta play.
Yeah, where God is the playwright, author, the world is the stage, and humans are the actors. The message is basically about the need for charity to achieve salvation.
A play within a play, almost.
And another famous one, La Cena del Rey Baltasar, King Balthazar's feast, uses the biblical story to symbolize sacrilege, the punishment for taking the Eucharist unworthily. Very symbolic, very didactic, but also incredibly poetic and staged lavishly.
How did Calderon handle the theme of honor compared to Lope?
It's different. While Lope showed its many facets, Calderon often seemed to critique its extremes, especially the violence it could provoke. Plays like El Médico de su Honra, the physician of his honor, depict noblemen driven to murder their innocent wives based on mere suspicion, all in the name of preserving family honor. It's brutal. It feels like a deliberate move away from lighter comedy towards the gravity of tragedy.
He also wrote heroic and devotional plays, like El Príncipe Constante.
Constant Prince, yes.
Yeah.
About a Portuguese prince martyred in Morocco. It presents his suffering and death not just as tragic, but as a Christian victory, like Christ's passion. He becomes a saint through his constancy and faith. Calderon really explored these deep theological questions of suffering and redemption.
And he developed the Zarzuela, the musical drama.
He did, that uniquely Spanish form. His El Golfo de las Sirenas, the Gulf of the Sirens, is considered the first proper zarzuela. They often involved incredibly elaborate Baroque staging, complex machinery. Real spectacles.
So the influence of Lope, Calderon, Tirso, it clearly went beyond Spain.
Oh, massively. The French playwrights were definitely paying attention. Corneille's Le Cid owes a huge debt to a Spanish play about El Cid, and Molière's Don Juan obviously draws from Tirso.
They borrowed plots, or just the energy.
Both, probably. The comedia's energy, its blend of genres, its complex plots, its less rigid structure compared to French classicism, it was very appealing. Later, the Romantics absolutely loved it.
Like Goethe. Victor Hugo.
Exactly. Goethe picked up on Faustian themes he saw in Mira de Mesqua and Calderon. Hugo's plays, like Hernani and Ruy Blas, are steeped in the Spanish Golden Age spirit. They loved the passion, the grandeur, the focus on individual will.
And Don Juan. He just took on a life of his own, didn't he?
An incredible afterlife. From Tirso's original seducer and rebel, he's become this enduring archetype in Western culture, reinterpreted constantly for over 350 years in plays, poems, novels, opera, film.
How has he changed over time?
Dramatically. Molière made him a cynical atheist nobleman. Mozart and De Ponte gave him that iconic operatic treatment. The Romantics saw him sometimes as a fallen angel, sometimes, like in Zarilla's version, as a libertine who actually gets saved by love in the end.
Right, that one's still performed every year in Spain.
It is. Then you get modern takes, psychological studies, like Rostand seeing him as driven by insatiable desire, or George Bernard Shaw turning him into a representation of the life force. He's like a mirror reflecting each era's anxieties about sex, morality, rebellion, freedom.
It's amazing. And the study of these plays, the scholarship, has evolved too.
Definitely. You had foundational figures like Menéndez y Pelayo in Spain, meticulously editing and analyzing the works. Then, particularly British scholars like Alexander Parker came up with influential ways to interpret them.
Parker's ideas, about theme being key.
Right. He argued that the dramatic action always serves the central theme, that the play's unity lies in that theme, not necessarily the plot, and that poetic justice, how characters end up, reveals the moral message. Powerful ideas.
And modern critics build on that,
Yeah.
or challenge it.
Both. There's ongoing debate. People explore the poetry more deeply, the
Yeah.
psychology of the characters, and that idea of meta-theater plays, being aware of themselves as plays, gets a lot of attention, especially with Calderon.
Like in Life is a Dream.
Precisely. Where Segismundo literally questions if he's dreaming or awake, if his life is real or just a performance. Today, scholars use tools from semiotics, cultural studies, trying to understand these incredibly rich texts from all angles.
It really shows their enduring power. So we've journeyed through centuries of Spanish history, invasions, unification, empire, faith, and seen how that unique pressure cooker forged this incredible dramatic tradition.
From those early church plays and street performers, through the genius of Lope de Vega defining the form, to the philosophical depths scaled by Calderon, the Commedia really was a mirror and maybe even a shaper of the Spanish soul.
So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, what aspect of Spanish Golden Age drama or the society that birthed it really stands out to you? Was there anything that surprised you about this period?
And here's something to ponder. How do these timeless conflicts, honor versus love, free will versus fate, illusion versus reality, and these iconic character types born from Spain's unique history, how do they continue to echo in the stories we tell, the movies we watch, and the human dilemmas we face right here, right now?